So let's get into we just draw. It feels like a loss to Chicago
Freudian
Fire.
slip.
We're gonna recap some of what we analyzed in that game, but I think even as part of that analysis and what happened in that game, Dave texted Carmen and I, and he said he's got a moment of clarity.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
A moment of clarity. What does this mean, Carmen?
I wish I knew. All I know is I'm very excited about it.
Professor Katz with a moment of clarity is something I'm pretty excited about. So let's jump into this insight.
So it doesn't really pertain necessarily absolutely to the Chicago game. It's more of a season-long sort of epiphany. So the thing that was bothering me was we killed Charlotte away at Charlotte 3-1, and then we got killed at home against Charlotte 3-1. And you know, what's the difference, right? Because actually turns out, you know, when you go back, I think it's the exact same starting lineup. And one of the things that I pointed out was that I noticed that one difference was that at Charlotte, we played with no airplanes, and then at home, we played with airplanes. So I was like, you know, and it was confusing me because I remember I gave Pineda all this credit. I said, look, he realized the problem in the offseason and he corrected it. Right. And we got off to this great start. Right. And then I was like, wait a second. Now we got airplanes coming back again. And then I was like, so maybe he switched it back. And then I was like, I couldn't make a difference. And I remember I said, well, maybe it's due to whoever we're playing. He's deciding on it.
Right.
So I decided, I'm like, duh. I take notes on these things. I said, I can go back and I can actually ask in every single game whether we were playing with the airplanes or not. So I went back into my notes and I said, all right, when were we playing it? Just try to figure out what he was doing. Because as you know, you rightly point out, we're not in the locker room. We don't get to know what the tactics are coming. So I started going through it. And I want to start by saying that once I get to the conclusion of all this, I want to say that it's not that I think that airplanes are really everything, right? We're going to talk about pinching in on this one. I think that's a big deal. There are a lot of other things that I think are tactically wrong or right with what we're doing. So it's not like everything is due to airplanes. But here we go, right? So in the first game, San Jose at home, we played no airplanes. Okay, we won 2-1. Toronto at home, we played no airplanes. Charlotte away, we played no airplanes. Portland at home, we played no airplanes. Columbus away, that was this crazy squad that we had, right? But again, no airplanes. In fact, their Cobb came in for Miles, and we still played it with this. We were doing this unbalanced 3, right? Where left back Gutman typically stayed back, and the right of the 2 center backs, which mostly was Miles Robinson, and in that game, Cobb was shifting over, okay? So, first 5 games.
Didn't
right?
that Columbus game, and that's when we got beat 5-1?
Oh, we got clobbered 6-1.
6-1.
Right. So coming off that game, we played.
I feel like though, Carmen, don't you recall like some airplane talk though earlier on in the season?
I thought we did, but it sounds like we were not.
No, I was saying that I was giving him credit that we weren't playing 4 in the back.
I think
we were only playing 3 in the back.
I think you were saying, we adjusted to only 1 airplane.
Yes. What I mean by airplanes is both.
Okay.
Going simultaneously like we had last year, and really often having 2 at the back. You know, we have airplanes when you see both Lennon and Gutman up, and when you see only 2 in the back.
Got it.
Okay. So Red Bulls comes along, and we play at home, and suddenly the airplanes are back. We win 1-0. We go to New York City FC, and also airplanes, and we tie 1-1. We get Toronto away. We continue to play airplanes. We tie 2-2. Chicago at home, we have airplanes again. We win 2-1. Memphis in the tragic U.S. Open Cup match, we have super airplanes. We lose at home 2-1. And then at Nashville, suddenly the away game at Nashville, suddenly no airplanes again. Okay. So that's one that started to confuse me. And we lose 1-0. We lose 3-1. Sorry. Then Miami, right? That's the
Lose
Joseph
2-1.
Martinez game. We lose 2-1. Airplanes are back. So we go no airplanes at Nashville. We play airplanes at Miami. We play Charlotte at home, airplanes again. Colorado at home, no airplanes. So you're like, oh my God, what's going on now? But if you look at it, it is now clear what happened, right? So we started out, we played 5 consecutive games with no airplanes. So clearly that was a tactical thing that we started out the season. We switched for whatever reason, we have no idea, but for whatever, and some of this, you have to also realize that there were people who got injured or red carded or whatever, the different things happened, but nevertheless, we switched. We played 5 consecutive games where we did have airplanes. And then coming off of that, we went in the last 5 games, we said no airplanes, airplanes, no airplanes.
Okay. Keeps changing.
Okay. So what I think is that there are 3 periods. The first clarity is that there were 3 periods. First 5 games, we were clearly tactically committed to that offset 3 in the back with no airplanes, right? Then we switched back to the same exact formation we had last year with 2 airplanes going down. And now we have finally gone to whatever the reason is, but it's game by game because it's going back and forth. Okay, so I feel like there have been 3 periods of the tactics that Pineda has done. One was no airplanes for whatever reason. One back to complete airplanes, and now he's switching game by game. Okay, so that's the first thing. I finally, because I couldn't understand, I couldn't figure it out. But the fact that you had 5 and then 5 in a row really tells me that something was actually done, right? That was a switch on the team.
So he's doing like an A/B test. Is what you're
maybe,
saying?
Or maybe,
and now
maybe
he's going
adjusted
and
something.
now he's going multivariate testing.
If you had to guess, you were like, look, he made a switch. We were doing something. He didn't quite like it. He was like, oh, no, I want to go back to what I did before. I did that. Then it didn't go so well. And so then now he's like, maybe game by game, we'll figure it out. But okay, so now if you do the analysis, 7 games, we've played airplanes. 7 games, no airplanes going into the Chicago match. Okay.
All right.
So 7 and 7. Want to hear the stats?
Yeah.
Yes,
go.
please.
Okay. So one of the things I've been saying is that, or one of the things Pineda's been saying, the reason for having airplanes is you go forward, right? And you should score more, right? Because that's the whole point.
You're
getting unbalanced
getting an overload,
2v1,
yep.
right? So when we play airplanes, in those 7 matches, we've scored 9. When we don't play airplanes, we've scored 17.
Right.
Okay.
So you say, it seems like that's not actually the truth. When we actually have the airplanes, we're not actually scoring more. In fact, we're scoring significantly less. What about defensively, right? So when we have airplanes and everybody's going forward, you might say we're vulnerable. We've given up 11 goals.
Yeah.
Right. When we have no airplanes, we've given up about 13 goals. It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really seem goals for, goal against. Now, obviously, not every goal is given up for airplanes or
Right.
not airplanes. But actually, the biggest thing, if you look at the goals for and a goal against,
Is we're scoring
is
more
that
goals.
The airplanes are actually, what I've been saying, is inhibiting our goals.
Right.
Why? Because it's crowding the space.
Yeah.
That actually is the biggest thing. And so the question being, if that's true, if we're scoring significantly fewer goals, and we're maybe leaving ourselves vulnerable, why would you bother? Why would you try to do that? Right? So now, what's our record?
Okay. The record right now is 6-4-4.
Yeah, but what's the record with airplanes and without airplanes?
I don't know. Tell us.
So when we have airplanes, with everybody bombing forward, 2 wins, 3 losses, 2 ties.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't have airplanes, 4 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie. So our record is significantly better without the airplanes.
Okay. Now, how, for the listeners, do you feel your diagnosis here of truly judging whether we have airplanes or not is accurate, right? So I imagine listeners like, who is this guy to say whether we have 2 guys up or not? Like, is he this analytical? Is Dave this in tune to whether the airplanes are up or not? Like, that would be my thought if I'm listening to this podcast.
Yeah, fair. But I feel really confident. I really watch it. And you can, it's the thing about it is If it were subtle, I would say, yeah, I'm really worried. Maybe it's, Lennon got up one day and he decided I want to go forward more or whatever. It's not subtle, right? When we are really playing with the airplanes, the moment we win the ball, they go and they just don't really stop until they get to the front, right?
Yeah.
And you end up with many, many attacks where Lennon and Gutman, if they're the two backs, are both penalty, our penalty area or above forward
at the edge of the top of the 18. Yeah.
When we were playing the first 5 games, you couldn't really find that. Not to say there wouldn't be a single moment and whatever, but and you can consistently, when we're doing airplanes, you can consistently see moments when we have only 2 in the back.
How did you label this last game against Chicago Fire? Airplanes or none?
I didn't. I marked it on the notes.
Because in my head, I was marking it no airplanes.
Definitely airplanes.
I watched Gutman and particularly Ronald Hernandez.
Yep.
Not that Hernandez wasn't up because he had some really good crosses, but it felt fine that he was there. I mean, in fact, there were great crosses, and I think one of them led to a goal.
I think Hernandez is naturally further back. So when he plays, it's a little harder to say because he's a little more hesitant. But what I would say is that, when you see Hernandez down a lot, right? Yeah. And in the case, he was actually forward a fair amount, maybe not as much as Lennon is normally, but every time he was forward, Lennon was forward too.
So you definitely felt Gutman was way up then in this Colorado game.
Yeah, in the Colorado game?
I mean, sorry, in the Chicago game. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so every time that Gutman was up, right, every time Hernandez was up, Gutman was up too.